Welcome, everyone. We've got another great event today. Simon Rosenberg here, Hopium Chronicles. Joining me today is Nikki Fried, who is the incredibly hard-working, hard-charging state party chair in what was, up until very recently, the most important battleground state in America, of Florida. Welcome, Chairwoman Fried.
Thanks for having me, Simon, and thanks to everybody for listening today.
Well, listen, we're kicking off. This interview is gonna kick off a campaign, a new campaign that we're calling our Expansion Fund, to invest in 5 state parties that are critical for us getting the majority back in both the House and Senate, and at the presidential level. And so we're going to kick that off this week, and you're going to join Texas and Iowa and Alaska and Maine in this pool of states that we're asking our community to make strategic investments in. So it's great to have you here to help kick off this process. But before we get updated on your important work in Florida, just talk a little bit about your story for those that don't know you and how you became state party chair in Florida, your background as an statewide elected official, and just to give us the quick story of your journey.
Yeah, so quick story of my journey. I'm an attorney by trade. I went to the University of Florida. Don't talk about my Gator football team right now. We're not going to do that. But, triple Gator at UF. I was student body president here, was active in student government. And then I practiced law for 10 to 15 years, traditional law from commercial litigation. I was a public defender back here in Gainesville for 3.5 years. And then I started doing government consulting for about 10 years, doing everything from representing Broward School Board to the medical marijuana industry, nonprofit organizations for children in special needs and foster care system. And in 2018, after Donald Trump was elected, and we just saw across the country, that this blue and this pink wave, and I was at a conference in South Florida talking actually about marijuana, because at that time I would become kind of one of these national and statewide leaders when it came to reforming of the marijuana industry and the movement on fully legalization. And so in 2018, I'm at this conference on marijuana, and people were asking about what was going on in the Florida governor's race in 2018, and excitement and energy that was happening here in the state of Florida, but really the realization that there was not a lot of people in the marijuana space that was running statewide or members of Congress. And so I got back to the hotel room, and I was brushing my teeth, and I had turned to my fiance and I said, I'm going to run for governor. And I had this look in my eyes that he knew that there was no going back from this journey that I was about to take us on. Ended up not running for governor in 2018, but ran for commissioner of agriculture, which is agriculture and consumer services. So I got to take not only the marijuana part on the agricultural aspect, and then also coupling it with my now 20 years on the consumer side of being an advocate and attorney, partner that together, had a very clear messaging going into our campaign. We campaigned on 3 W's, weed, water, and weapons. And was unfortunately the only Democrat to have crossed the finish line in that 2018 election, having lost Senator Bill Nelson, Andrew Gillum, and then becoming the only statewide elected first female to ever have one commissioner of agriculture, not just in Florida, but the South, and then became a member of the Florida cabinet for those 4 years next to Ron DeSantis, and then eventually ran for governor in 2022, lost my primary. And then when I was out of office in 2023, knew that while I was the last statewide elected Democrat, that I was not going to be the last statewide elected Democrat. That's my journey here. And that's why I decided to run for chair of the party to really get us back into an ability to win these statewide races and build back Florida into a true swing state again.
Well, for some of us of a certain age, Florida is always going to be sort of this place that I'm never going to give up on Florida. I mean, Florida, I was at Lawton Childs' second inaugural. I knew the old Florida, Buddy McKay and Lawton Childs and Bob Graham, these incredible leaders that Florida produced, the era of the sunshine laws and the sort of the openness of Florida. And I think for those of us who grew up with those leaders, and then also, as you know, I worked a lot in helping us identify opportunities in the Latino vote and the Cuban space in Florida. This helping us get back on track in Florida is one of our most important national priorities. I mean, part of the reason we're here today is that, and we're going to be supporting you, is that when you look at the electoral college map in 2032. Because of the shift of population in the United States from blue states to red states, we're going to lose some of our electoral college votes in the next redistricting and reapportionment that happens. And that it means that we have to put either Florida or Texas back in play. I mean, we just don't really have a choice. And there's going to have to be a national commitment of national resources over many, many years to build back. We were proud to have the very first campaign that when Hopium started, was Donna Deegan's race in Jacksonville. We helped her get elected, and we helped Tom Keene win his special election, and so Florida has always been very much central to me and to my work, my political work, and I want to be a partner with you in making sure that we make the case to the national donor community and to the national party of the kinds of investments required to make Florida competitive again. This is going to be an important part of our journey at Hopium. And so it's really, give us an update on what you're seeing on the ground. It looks like now you're going to have a competitive race for governor in the Democratic primary, but also Tom Jolly put out a poll showing the race, him dead even right now, right? Giving us a sense there could be opportunity there this year.
Yep.
Or this cycle, I should say.
And Simon, you're right. And this is the conversations that I've been having with donors and ecosystem supporters, for the last few years, but even more so that we're seeing that this data coming out that 40% of the American population has moved to the South, that if we don't, as Democrats, invest in the South now, not in 2030, not in 2029, but now, and start laying those foundational groundworks, we're not going to have an opportunity to take back the White House and to maintain the White House or get a majority in the House or the Senate. So for people who out there in the ecosystem that says, oh, Florida's lost, that's not an option. Like it's just not an option if we want democracy to hold in our nation. And obviously we're being tested every single day with current, moment that we live in. And so in Florida, we have been building back. It's going to take some time in a process. For 30 years, we've had, in my seat, we've gone through state party chairs every 2 years. Every time we've had an election loss, they blame the state party, and you lose your chair, and then you start all over again. And the consistency of leadership or lack thereof has helped us get to where we are today. And so that's why it was my commitment to continue running and to be in this spot. But there's a lot of energy on the ground. I mean, we just won another 2 special elections a couple of weeks ago in the Orlando area, overperforming by 15 and 22 points. We kicked off this year's electoral successes up in CD1 and CD6. While we didn't win those seats, they were in the reddest part of our state and was able to move the needle 22 points in one seat and 17 points in another seat. The overperformance of Democrats kind of started in Florida, but we have been the lab rats of Project 2025 for the last 6 years under Ron DeSantis. We were the ones who first saw the book bans and the removing of local, officials from office, and the attacks on our LGBTQ plus community, the attacks on our DEI and affirmative action, and reproductive health care. Like, it all kind of started in Florida. And I apologize to the rest of the nation, because now you're experiencing what Florida has been living through. And I think that is why we've called our program for statewide organizing, calling it the pendulum. The pendulum has to move back, and Florida Democrats are at the center of pushing that energy to do so. So we are doing statewide field organizing year round in all 67 of our counties, making sure that we're recruiting candidates up and down the ballot. We are seeing things like the corruption day in and day out from Governor DeSantis and his minions, the stealing of $10 million of Medicaid that went down to the Republican Party, that went and attacked our legalization amendment last year and our reproductive health care amendment last year, to alligator Alcatraz that has stolen, $350 more million of money that should be going into emergency preparedness, giving it to no bid contracts of Republican donors. And then, of course, Florida, as our past commissioner of agriculture, knowing how important our migrant community is to our ecosystem and our environment here. It's number one economic driver of Florida is tourism. The workers in tourism industry make sure that people can come and spend a weekend in Disney World and come to our beaches at a reasonable cost. Then it's agriculture. We have 2 million people that work in agriculture, and my statistics that I've always used is 1 million are undocumented. And then you've got construction. And so all of the bedrock of our economy here in Florida is also being harmed by the local programs that are here in our state. Property insurance is the number one issue on people's minds that own homes or renters, and young college kids are getting out of school and you can't even afford, to pay back their student loans, and now their health care is at jeopardy. So there's a lot of things that are going on here in Florida, and that's giving us an opportunity to really lean in on, one, holding the Republicans accountable, but more importantly, showing what Democrats are doing for you every day, that we are always the party that comes up with bold ideas and economic stability and putting workers first. So we're getting back to those basics. We do have all of our statewide candidates elections. We've got the governor, and then as the cabinet is the governor, the chief financial officer, the attorney general, and the commissioner of agriculture. All those are up in 2026. So we are recruiting candidates for all the down ballots in those races. But we do have a governor's race that is coming up. We've got David Jolly, who was a member of Congress as a Republican, who's now registered as a Democrat. He did have a poll that came out last week that showed that he was up over Byron Donalds, who is the perceived nominee on the Republican side because of his endorsement from Trump. And then we do anticipate that Orlando Mayor Jerry Demings is going to be getting into that primary as well, which again creates energy on the ground, gets us into our constituents. And as long as we are keeping it civil, be able to build a coalition where 1/3 of Florida at this point are independents or NPAs, no party affiliates. And so we can form this coalition with our NPAs at an early juncture. It gives us an opportunity to get this pendulum moving in the right direction faster than would have otherwise been anticipated.
I mean, it's important for people to realize that even though that was a campaign poll from the Jolly polling team showing the race competitive, other public polls have shown the race within mid-single digits. I mean, there's not, there's a sense that Byron Donalds is not knocking the ball out of the park, even with Republican voters at this point. And this could be a cycle of opportunity for us in Florida. I mean, certainly, as you've pointed out, I mean, not only do you have these national headwinds, but can you talk a little bit more about the property insurance issue? Because I don't know that people outside of Florida may be as familiar with that as all of you are. Because certainly when I was down there recently and did a campaign event with David Jolly, this was very center to the conversation that took place, with the voters at the event that we were at.
Yeah, I mean, property insurance is obviously a necessity for all of us that live here in Florida. I was born and raised here, lived through Hurricane Andrew in 1992, where we saw a complete destruction of the insurance industry, where most of our insurance carriers left the state of Florida, and we created 2 government entities, one for general property insurance called Citizens, and then the reinsurance entity of it called the CAT Fund. And over the last 30 years that Republicans have now controlled our state, they keep playing this game with insurance companies. It's Rick Scott started the problem where he tried to what's called depopulating Citizens Insurance, which is that government entity. And he depopulated by bringing a lot more domestic carriers into the state, lowering the threshold of the capital that these insurance companies needed in order to participate in our insurance market. And then when we got hurricane after hurricane after hurricane, these companies were not able to sustain being able to get people whole again afterwards. And so they all went out of business, and Citizens, insurance went back up as far as the population, which is a disaster to Florida. Because in fact, if a hurricane hits Florida and the Citizens numbers are, let's say, 1.2 million policies, if Citizens can't pay for it, the insurance carrier, then the actual citizens of our state, it's called a hurricane tax, that anybody who owns a house and has an insurance policy, regardless if it's Citizens or it's Nationwide or any other carriers, we are on the hook. And if a hurricane hits into a very populated area with enough citizens policies, it can bankrupt the state of Florida. And so you saw this huge influx of citizens policies when Ron DeSantis first came in. And so he wanted to depop citizens. And so what did he do? He gave blank checks to the insurance companies, took away the rights of citizens to actually sue their insurance carriers if they don't pay or underpay or are non-responsive. And you have seen, since Ron DeSantis became governor, a 400% increase in premiums. And you're talking about, individuals and some seniors who are on fixed incomes and seeing something that might have been a $3,000 a year to now having to pay $15,000 a year, making it absolutely unaffordable for people to live here in the state of Florida. And the insurance companies, you keep seeing time and time again, huge bonuses to the C-suite, to their corporate side of things, $50 million worth of profits that are going back to the executives. And at the same time, people can't find insurance. And if they find insurance, it has become just so unaffordable that people can't live here under the current conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I was, I think this is a very Florida specific thing. This is what is going to be central to the governor's race, for example. I mean, it's where the governor really has to deliver, whoever the next governor is. David Jolly is somebody I've known. We all know him from MSNBC, his years. He's out of the box strong. I mean, he's making the race competitive, and it shows that, if we end up having a Democratic primary there, which it sounds like we will, this could be a year of real opportunity for us, because you have all the downward pressure coming from the failed Washington Republican Party, coupled by the hangover of the DeSantis years, which have left so many problems unsolved, many far worse than they were before. And it's one of the reasons we're going to be investing with you, Nikki, together, because I do think this is a cycle of opportunity for us. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you've talked about voter registration being very central. This is voter registration week in America. Talk a little bit about how you're approaching the voter registration challenge in Florida.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and for multiple reasons. And I think, let me take a step back. It's a national problem for Democrats, because what had happened after the last 20 years, after we had the McCain-Feingold, that a lot of the dollars went to the C3 and C4 tables to do voter registration and strip that away from the party apparatus. And so when you're talking to a new voter and you're not wearing your Democratic label, you're not able to have those conversations to get loyalty to party brand or to the issues. And it makes it more difficult. And more people were already registering as independents even before this latest moment of American history. And so what has happened is the party wasn't doing voter registration. It was done by a lot of third party groups, which are doing a great job. So much so that 1/3 of our state is now independent. It was good. But now we have a problem. And what's also then happened the last couple of years is that Ron DeSantis has forced and has passed laws that have suppressed our voters to such an extreme that now we have a deficit of about 1.1, 1.2 million voters between us and the Republicans. Everything from changing the laws of how the C3s and C4s can register voters, the extreme amounts of penalties, the inability for voters to have access to vote by mail. Every 2 years, people get kicked off of the vote by mail. So we got to start all over again, where we know so many people are now accustomed to it. So if they don't get their vote by mail and don't realize there's an election, they don't vote. And now they're going on to an inactive list. So there's a lot of voter suppression that's happened in our state. DeSantis created his own election police, arrested people before the 22 election that were returning citizens after an amendment that we all passed in 2018. And so all of these things are uphill battles for us, but we are not going to take this lying down. In our pendulum program, we have gone back to our voter registration in a volunteer capacity until real resources come into the state, which we know is necessary to build upon the infrastructure that we're already forming. So we have across our entire state, each one of our clubs and our caucuses and our local chapters have all been trained on quality control, All of them have certain metrics of whether it's a voter registration or getting people back on vote by mail. Kills kind of three birds with one stone. It's the voter contact, it's the relationship building, and it's getting people registered at that same exact time. So we're hitting the streets. We are doing it very data centric. We're trying all different types of things, but certainly if you're listening, we need volunteers, and to go on to our website, floridadems.org, to help us do this. We are creating an army of volunteers on the ground who are frustrated with the moment that we are living through in Florida. And it's going to take time. People want to see those numbers, like the closing of the 1.1, but we are also looking at a very deliberate locations of where we need to flip back. We need to flip back Miami-Dade. We have a really important city of Miami mayor's race this November. So we're focusing on voter registration in Miami in particular. And then we've got specific races in Palm Beach County and Hillsborough County and Orlando and Duval, some of our bigger areas where we're putting the financial resources on the ground. So that way, while we might not be able to close the $1.2 million gap at this moment, but we're able to show electoral wins by focusing our time and our energy and our financial resources in those areas, not just for this 26 cycle, but we know we've got, in order to get to redistricting for 2030 and 2032, how many seats we need to flip by then, and putting those resources in the ground today. So maybe we can't win the seat in 26, but it lays the foundation for 28 and 30.
Let me get to one more question. And everyone, you heard that, right? We've talked a lot at Hopium about the centrality of voter registration. This has to be a universal project for us every day. One of the reasons I'm excited to be working with the Florida Democratic Party is they're making voter reg a major priority on the ground. We have to learn how to do this. This is something we unlearned or forgot, and we need, and you guys are leading the charge, Nikki. And so it's great to be with you. Let me ask you one last question is, we've seen data now nationally, and I realize that the Hispanic Latino vote in Florida is very different than the Hispanic Latino electorate, particularly in the heavily Mexican American parts of the country. But we've seen data now that there's been significant erosion for Trump and the Republicans with Latino voters. This has been one of their big success stories in recent years. We know that Spanish language media across the country is full of stories about deportations and families being uprooted and people being sent to gulags. And we know that in your state, that Trump has done something which no president has done before, which is really made, deporting Cubans and now large numbers of Venezuelans, people who'd fled communism and come to Florida, Nicaraguans as well, right? Made this a huge priority. I mean, he's trying to deport, if he gets his way on the Venezuelans, we're talking potentially, high hundreds of thousands of people just in Florida alone. How do you think this is changing the politics in the Cuban and Venezuelan community for you going forward?
It gives us an opportunity to have those conversations, because you are hearing that. And I think that what people are most frustrated with about this moment is that even in these communities that voted for Trump said, we're going to deport criminals. We're going to deport the worst of the worst. And then it's all of a sudden it's your husband. Wait a second. My husband's been here for 20 years as a small business owner. Why exactly is that the case? Or it's your teacher who's here on TPS status, temporary parole status. And so they feel very betrayed and very lied to, knowing that that's not who they're going after. They're going after the people that are showing up to court with legal documentation. People that are going to court, that are showing up because they're trying to get the pathway to naturalization. And so you are seeing that. And here in Florida, we're going to have a double whammy in some of our areas, including Hialeah. Hialeah is the #1 city of Cubans outside of Cuba. And Hialeah also happens to be the #1 city of Obamacare. And so you're going to have a double whammy inside of some of our parts of Miami-Dade County. And it's going to be important for Democrats not to just be the blame finger, see, we told you, this is what's going on. But not only that, but, making them realize, yes, you were lied to. Yes, you were, misguided and some, but more importantly, we need to keep them back as Democrats. And so it's not just about this moment, but how do we build back that trust and those relationships? And so that it's not just a 26 cycle movement, but it is a consistent movement and a coalition that we can rely on. But we're hearing stories every single day, all across the board, that is really ripping apart families, that are destroying small businesses who have been, the fabric of so many of these communities for so long. I mean, my back neighbors growing up were Cuban. I heard since, they came here in 1967. I mean, I went to La Sola to Cayo Ocho before I even knew what Cayo Ocho meant, and was having my casitas before, my cafes before I even knew, what I was doing, because that was a part of our culture in Miami-Dade County. And we would need to get back to that, where, it was something that we as Democrats continuously showed up for, made sure that, that there's a pathway to citizenship, and the recognition that we are all immigrants. And the Cuban policy that has been in America, that there has been a special privileges or policies that were just geared to Cubans because of the proximity to the continental United States, and because of the fact that of the communism, the socialism. We've heard all the stories of family members coming on lifeboats because their families, businesses were taken from them, from the Cuban government, or the lines for water and for bread, and the political prisoners. And we were always that party that welcomed with open arms, and made sure that they were the fabric and intertwined into our communities. And that's being ripped apart. And so we are showing up for them now, and we will continue to show up.
It is, as somebody who's worked on immigration issues and also worked in the craziness of Florida politics myself, the way that Trump has turned on the Cuban American and Venezuelan American community is just stunning. It's stunning. And it is, and what people should know is that, as we like to say here, for Trump, that these aren't migrants. They're not just immigrants. They're not undocumented. They're people, right? These are families and people. And the what's happening, what could happen, to your point, just to finish up. I mean, not only is there's a human rights tragedy here, and you've had Alligator Alcatraz, where we just saw a story in the Miami Herald today that large numbers of the people that were sent there can't be found. We don't know where they are. Like, they are literally lost to their families and the system. But it's also the threat to the economy of Florida is so significant. To lose this many people who are working and contributing to the economy all at one time, it will be devastating. And so I think what we're hearing from the chair is that this is a cycle of opportunity for us in Florida, and we need to take advantage. Like any other opportunity, it's only an opportunity if we seize it, and we need to do it together. So we're glad to be here in the trenches with you, Nikki, and thank you for all your hard work. Thanks for signing up for 2 more years. Thanks for having the vision to lay out a plan.
It's 4 more years that I've signed up.
4 more. Oh my God. Thank you. I didn't realize that a lot of chairs are 2 years. I didn't realize you had a
4-year term. Yeah.
Well, now you're really crazy, right? And
yes.
But listen, thank you for doing it, and hopefully we'll have you back in a few months to check in on your progress. And everybody, we need to. This is it. Like, part of what this campaign is going to do is that, look, we got to go win Florida. Go win Virginia, New Jersey this November, but there's enough money in our family now for us to not only be funding the stuff that's in front of us, but to be making the strategic investments that are necessary to make things possible that may not have been possible otherwise without those investments. Our community did that last cycle. We were the largest investors in the North Carolina Democratic Party, over $1 million, which led us to have one of the best down ballot success stories in the country. We were the largest investor in Nebraska Democratic Party, which helped us win that blue dot. And that, these are investments we made early that made things that were possible reality. And that's where our head as a family has to get. We can do more than one thing at a time. And because if we don't make these kind of far-sighted investments, then these won't become opportunities for us in the future. So, Nikki, thanks for what you're doing. Look forward to partnering with you and all the good people of Florida to help liberate you from what has been a rough run down there over recent years.
Well, don't lose faith. Florida's worth fighting for, and certainly the people here on the ground take that seriously. We show up every day. The people out here are still hopeful. They're still happy warriors about what is happening in our state, because we know, and you're right. My role models growing up are Lawton Childs and Bob Graham, and so getting back to a place where decency and civility and leadership that crosses over not just your party that got you elected, but you truly govern for all the 23 million people that live here in the state of Florida. We're ready to get back there.
Thank you, Nikki. Good luck with everything. Stay in touch. Thanks, everybody. Listen, need you to be involved in this expansion project. Really important. I'm really excited about it, and you'll be hearing more about it in Hopium in the coming days. Thanks all.